Joining us on this episode is Hannah Kutner. Hannah is a full-time wedding and elopement photographer based in Colorado, quickly finding success in the industry while also managing a change in her style and figuring out the delicate work-life balance in a job that often takes over everything else in a photographer's life and summer. I'm Kyle Wilson, and this is The Photographer's Problem. I was cruising through your work this morning. I'm surprised prior to being connected through Narrative, I hadn't come across you yet before. It's really gorgeous. All of your style is this really wonderful romantic look, and I can see how you've I did the deep scroll where I was like, all right, let me see what it used to be and what it slowly turns into. I think it's always really fun with photographers. So it's really come together in this really, really wonderful way.
Oh, thanks so much. Yeah, I didn't archive any of my old work because I feel like some people are so adamant about archiving all their work that doesn't match their style. But I feel like that's the best thing, is to be able to go on someone's page and see where they've evolved from,
Yeah.
And you're like, oh,
Have
there's
you,
hope.
as you change style, do you run into things with communication with your clients to be like, hey, things are shifting or changing, or do you feel that you're changing it in small enough increments that it's not noticeable enough that your deliverables or somebody that booked you a year prior is going to be concerned?
So last year was probably my biggest shift, where I booked weddings, or I used to book them really far out, and I booked weddings 2 years prior, and I was fulfilling them. After I did this huge shift in my work, I basically went from being your classic post photographer to moving into documentary style, storytelling, this kind of cinematic storytelling style. So all of those clients, I had a conversation with almost all of them, and my editing style completely changed too. I did the very warm, orangey yellow, monochromatic edits, and then I had to talk with all of them, and I'm like, look, obviously I've leaned into this new style. I can fulfill the style you booked me for. Obviously I've done it my whole career. But if you guys feel like you resonate more with this newer approach I'm taking, feel free to let me know, and I can take that approach. And for a lot of my clients, they said they wanted a mix. A lot of people said they did book me because they wanted that classic pose photography look, but they also loved elements of the new style. So a lot of it was a mix. So it was really just a slow transition.
Do you feel, because I was looking through your work and you snapped into the storytelling less, if you were to cruise through my work, I would say I'm a posed photographer that's trying to not look posed. I'm trying to be hey, this is the cover of a magazine photo and you guys look stunning, or the cover of a romance novel or something. Mm-hmm. And then everything else in between is just voyeurism. But you snapped into, hey, we're going to run around, things are going to be in motion, I'm going to tell these stories of this couple really seamlessly. It looks like, is that a switch that you feel like you can just turn on and off?
Yeah, I think my whole mindset has kind of changed when it comes to it. I always tell my couples, especially my wedding couples that are wanting this more primarily hands-off approach and more just general prompting, that there are moments when we're going to lean into that more editorial style. And to me, that is when you see that artistic, almost magazine image, where it is going to be really posed and really, really set up. And I think it's more of I sprinkle that in, and I'm kind of assessing what the situation looks like, what their vibe looks like, what the mood looks like. If they're really in the flow and they're hanging out with each other, I'm not going to disrupt that and make that quick shift into posing them and setting up this whole picture. So if I even have this idea for a more editorial image pop into my head, I'll save it for later, when we do have that time where it almost feels like a transition moment, when they're kind of not out of the flow, but they're not genuinely interacting and laughing the whole 9 yards. So I would say, I guess it's pretty on-off switch. But with that, when I'm, pulling the trigger, it's a lot of times me reading the room and assessing how everyone seems to feel.
Yeah, absolutely. Was that style shift something so that you could, obviously there's a few pieces of this pie, but to market to a different kind of client, to be a different kind of photographer for XYZ client, or to feel better about the work that you're making, or just to keep it mixed up? Like, what's the motivation behind, what, hey, I've been doing this and being successful at it for so long, but now I'm going to go do this instead? Or is it simply like, obviously running around photos that are kind of blurry and in motion are really popular right now? That's really bookable work. Is that play
Yeah.
into it too?
So I think I was at a really stagnant place with my photography a little bit over a year ago. So like early summer of 2023. Um, I've been doing photography for 10 years at that point. I got my first camera when I was 13, and I felt like I was doing the same thing over and over again. And I was just like resenting creating work because it was so boring for me. I had like a notes list on my phone of all the poses I went through for every single couple, and I would literally just click them off the list, and I'd have like a hot shoe mount to my camera, and I'd like have the list up. And I'd just like go down, and I felt like I was making no like genuine connections with my couples. I felt like I wasn't creating art that was like meaningful to them past literally asking like, where do you want to shoot? And I guess that was even another facet of it. Like, I live in a town where, a classic like Colorado, like town where there's two or three like really like prominent landscapes. And I felt like every single couple wanted to shoot the same spot, like with the little mountains in the background. Um, and it didn't really feel like sentimental to them or personalized. And I think I've like before I was a photographer, like I loved to paint, I loved to draw, and I felt like in other forms of art, like I was really creative. And then I felt like at a point when I dealt like fully went into client work in photography, I just lost that creativity. And it was just like this very systematic rinse and repeat. So that's kind of where I came into the idea of these photo shoots that feel like movies because I've always been obsessed with cinema. And at the time that I did the transition, there were not like a lot of people doing it yet. It wasn't a huge thing. The word documentary style wasn't like, I don't want to use the word blown. It wasn't as like confusing then. It wasn't as loose that a lot of people like started using the word documentary style. There were genuinely like a few documentary style photographers, and they took a hands off approach. And I think seeing that kind of gave me the permission slip. And then when I had done my first documentary style shoot, I just posted like a model call, and I shared it. It was the most traction I had ever gotten on my work before. And like, I'm so grateful for that because that was like what gave me the momentum to make that transition full time into doing documentary style, because that bit of work, that like trial bit, was so well received.
Yeah. So obviously, like, I think that's, I've run into that as well, where I feel very complacent. And I think there's this like fine line between, well, people are booking me in November for their wedding 8 to 12 months out.
Mm,
And I think a really good metric of any wedding photographer, and I think to like Jordan Voth or something, who no matter what room the guy walks into, he's going to make it look like a Jordan Voth shoot. And it's really consistent. And that's something that I
mm,
see any successful photographer like yourself doing. But it can start to feel like, ugh, I'm so boring. I'm so bland. I need to go do
mm.
some other things to like get excited about or be creative, whether it be weddings or otherwise. I'd be interested, like, beyond the fact that you obviously said you painted and you draw or drew, and like that's, you obviously have external influences with your camera and
Yeah.
other sources, but what do you have a like a mental process for, okay, you're doing the thing that's really speaking to you right now, and you obviously kind of beat the curve, you probably set the trend in some ways, like to being the style that's kind of popular right now because you are popular.
Yeah.
But what's going to keep you not just doing what you're doing right now for the next 24 to 36 months? Are you conscientious of like, okay, this is cool and I'm really nailing it, but like, what's the evolution of this?
Yeah, 1,000%. So yeah, I feel like I'm in like a really transitional period again. with my work and kind of the direction I'm taking with booking, just because I don't want to be in the same situation again. And like in full transparency, I think things can change really, really quickly when you learn how to do your business the right way. And for example, like, and I still absolutely love the clients who I've been serving, last year, this past year. But once I really got a good understanding of my business and, my demand and the kind of work I was giving, I've realized I genuinely didn't change my prices for like 5 years. And it's like I was charging $2,500 like 4 years ago. And then I still was just booking that. And I've like had to like 3, 4 times my prices since then. And you're also shooting like different kind of work when you're in these different like pricing categories. Um, and I'm trying to, and you're also booking with people for different, kinds of reasons. Like I'm fulfilling, I still was like until the very beginning of this year, like fulfilling that posed work. And I had already been completely switched out of my style for like over a year at that point. Um, so in trying to prevent that from happening, I'm trying to do shorter time frame booking. So, or not book as far as in advance. So, whereas I used to book weddings 2 years out, I'm only booking weddings like 9-ish months out now. Some,
And I think
maybe.
if you're upping your prices, you're gonna run into like a different booking period with clients too. It's just
Yeah.
similar to like there's this really sweet window where I really hated working with wedding planners. And I
Yeah.
realized the wedding planners I hated working with were a very particular price point wedding planner who didn't fully trust me because the client didn't know what they were doing either. And then as that number went
Yeah.
up, well now my wedding planner experience like skyrocketed because they really
Yeah.
trusted me as a peer. And so similarly, you've got people who book 2 years out and they're like, I'm not going to classify people, but they're this like 35 to $5,500 price point who are trying to be really far in advance. They're fiscally conscious, but like then there's that 6, 8, 10 client, and they're booking 8 to 9 months out, and because they don't need to do 18-month planning.
Yeah. 1,000%. Um, well, it's so funny. That's one of the big things I learned. Like, I realized that I had to do a lot of like mindset work around money in this like pivotal point of my career because I never really learned that part of it up until last year when I made my first business investment, which was almost exactly a year ago, in Jai Long's like business map. That was the first investment I literally had made in my photography business outside of buying the necessary equipment. Like I had not bought education ever. Like ever. And I mean, I was doing it for 10 years. I went to my first content day like 8 months ago.
Yeah,
And
it's so far into it, but did you from I so not to
yeah,
derail it because it'll come back.
yeah,
I didn't second shoot with any photographer till like year 6, 7, 8 or something like that. And at that point, and I think the first second shooting that I really did with a substantial photographer was Jess Hunter. And I got really nervous about it because I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to show up and I'm going to find out I don't know anything I'm doing. And Benj had given me a really good piece of advice. He's like, you're going to find out that like you're actually doing everything the way you like to do it. And so when you finally did go to these business courses or a content day or any education, did you walk away going, oh my gosh, I'm doing everything wrong? Or no, actually, I just really like the way that I do this part, this part, and this part.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Like if
Well,
it filled confidence in what you were already doing, or if it kind of dismantled it in a
yeah.
good way.
So I think two separate parts. I think in the content days, I was like, oh my God, I love the way I do things because just like, and they're really, and I talk about this because like I host retreats. Um, I'm in the content day retreat, like educator host in part of the industry. There are really, really good content days and retreats, and then there are really, really bad ones. And I think I've been to a few now, and I think when I went to my first like content day, that kind of validated to me like I really love the way I approach things. Just in the sense where I feel like sometimes the models are treated like they're these like wild animals, and they're like baking in the sun or they're like freezing cold, and everyone's just like calling out poses and like yelling at them, and
There's just a
everyone's like
group of them flocking. It's
yeah,
so I can't stand it. It drives it
yeah.
really is a weird situation.
Yeah, it's a weird. And like photographers become these like unhinged animals themselves, and they're like knocking people over and like, not really, but like trying to get the shot, and like there's all like this drama, whatever. And in hosting my first retreat, I noticed how no one actually knew how to not pose, which is like the craziest thing ever. And the second that the models, there would be like a null, and they seemed like they didn't know what to do. Um, Everyone like automatically, you could tell they were just like thinking of a pose to call out.
The next prompt, yeah.
Yeah, and then something I would teach is like, actually, when they're telling you like I'm not sure what to do right now, like let's foster this environment where we first give them positive encouragement. So instead of like solidifying like, oh right, you don't know what to do right now, let me give you something to do because like whatever you're doing is like incorrect. Like let's first validate them and say like, oh, actually what you're doing right now looks great. That's why I haven't even called out anything. And then like taking a second to like dig into the relationship and be like, okay, if you guys like were hanging out at this park, like what would you guys be doing? And letting the couple lead first before I'm just pulling out like a pose on my list and giving it to them. So that was really, on the other side of things, refreshing to see how.
Yeah, I think that's psychological benefit to tell your clients that they're like, I can't remember who said it, but it's as simple as asking your client to say, hey, that was so great. Can you do that again? And it's telling them you did a really good job and you did so good. I'm not BSing you. I'd like you to do it a second time. And it really tells them, oh my gosh, whatever I'm doing right now in this very uncomfortable foreign position is good. And if you can continue that encouragement, I tell them early on too. I say, hey, if I'm not talking to you, it means you're doing everything right. And so like early on, set the tone that if I'm quiet and floating around and not communicating with you, it's just because I'm both simultaneously trying to get them to just be natural, but also you're doing great work. So that's cool that you learned that really quickly, that you're like, I don't like this format of workshops because I think it's pretty jarring when you go to one and see 12 photographers just barking at two people trying to make out in the mountains, and it's very strange.
Yeah, really strange. Yeah. Oh, 1,000%. And it's really crazy how like much they're looking to us for guidance and that responsibility we hold. So I think that's something where I was like, I'm really doing this the way I feel good about. And then I guess something that completely I was like, whoa, I'm way off, is I never really understood like the monetary side of things and pricing and what like people in different ranges look like. And I think this is so funny, but when I was like charging around $2,800, I was talking to a friend and I was telling her, I like can't even, I feel like it's not embarrassing, but I was telling her that I'm booking high-end clients. And
yeah, it feels like it. How old were you when you were booking? I mean, well, I guess this was like
like 22.
Ago, right? Yeah, like it feels. I recall vividly booking $25,000 or $3,000 clients, and I would be sitting in a coffee shop, and I'm like 23, and I think they're giving me $3,000. Like I cannot believe I'm charming these people into that, and it feels like that because there's no relation.
Yeah, no, exactly, 1,000%. And I didn't know what like other people were charging, and I was very in my own like bubble. Like I wasn't really looking at other people, which was really good and also like not always so beneficial. Then I remember her telling me and being like, girl, you're working on the lower end of what people charge. And then in like investing in education, I learned that I thought that like the higher end clients you got, it always meant like more work from you and like more demand. But I actually learned when you're working with people who value you more, they're actually respecting you way more and asking less of you. Whereas you're not the wedding planner and the photographer, maybe somehow expected to be like the videographer, the social media like content like creator, and they want 6 client calls and they want you to like, you know, do like this, do 12 hours of coverage in like 6 hours somehow, you know. In
Yeah,
the
the trust that's gained from a client who is spending all the $5,000 that they have on you versus someone who's spending 9,000 when they could spend even more. They just inherently kind of trust you because it's not every penny they have. And every client's valuable and worthy in every direction, but when you're an item of luxury that isn't breaking the bank versus you're the one thing that they can
mm,
spend money on, you get a different kind of trust, and the other vendors are there and the whole teamwork process is different. Even the scheduling process feels more fluid and natural too. Did you pick up most of this financial space education from the Jai Long course, just to support Jai?
yeah, oh my gosh.
Was Jai's like business course the one that was like really helped structure this?
Yeah, I 1,000%. I mean, after his, and you know, I am constantly like furthering my education and listening to podcasts and stuff like that, but that was like the big back end investment I made, and it felt really big at the time. Like I eyed it for months and months and months, and to me at the time, like dropping, I think it was like 2,500, 3,000 on education, to me felt like I was buying a freaking sports car. Like I'm not kidding. It was so much money at the time. I was broke when I did it, and the just what I got from like the mindset was truly life changing, because I didn't really value my own work, and I didn't realize that like to get other people to want to invest in me, I had to believe that my own work was worth the investment, and I had to value my time. And I think this is kind of where it comes full circle, is that the when I moved up in the like wedding photography pricing, I realized my clients respected my time more, and they respected their like own time more, and they didn't want to have 3 consultation calls before they booked and be on the phone for a total of like 4 hours and text me instead of emailing me and have a long list of questions and want to see 52 galleries. They literally, like, honestly, probably my inquiry form was a little bit long for them, and they're like, okay, like, where can we pay? Like, I'll have my wedding planner reach out, you know?
I
Um,
think there's a value in like what you're it's a really silly analogy, but I've done it for some time now. And if I'm looking for a brand new Honda Civic, and a Honda Civic costs $35,000, and I run across a website that has one that looks like the one I want, but it's $1,900, I won't even click on the link because I just know it's not what I'm looking for. And so if I'm a
yeah,
wedding client and I'm looking for a photographer that's in this price bracket, because these are the ones that have been sent or referred, and everyone's 6, 7, 8, and then I run across a 2, 3, 4, even if the work is great, I'm probably not even going to reach out. But as soon as I find the right work at the right price, I'm stoked. Like, you obviously know what you're doing. So long as the personality matches when we talk on the phone, like, I'm a client, I'm stoked. Let's get it done. I have other stuff to plan in this wedding.
yeah. Oh my gosh, that's, well, it's funny you say that, because I'm in like, you know, those photography Facebook groups, and I was scrolling on one of them and I saw this photographer posted, and she got a response back from these wedding clients, and they said, sorry, they did the inquiry and then she sent the pricing guide, and they said, sorry, your work is sorry, your work is too cheap.
Yeah, yeah, you can be too cheap. That
Yeah.
like people think either there's a lot like I actually ask people, and not everyone does this, but I actually ask clients their estimated budget right in my content form. I like to know because I like to just cut to the chase. And if they're an elopement client, it's going to be a different pricing. And if they're, I don't, it's just a couple different ways to kind of filter people through. Because you can be informative and say that on your website or give a price guide early or say nothing at all. But I think that whenever I've shown my pricing and I've been lower or not shown it at all or not given a hint to it, I end up getting people that don't really have a relation to it. But as soon as I mention that it's kind of high, I start getting people that are way higher than my number even is. Like,
Mm,
oh my gosh, that $12,000 client would have never reached out to me if I said I started at $4,500. It's such a
right.
strange financial psychological thing. And for someone who doesn't have $12,000 to spend on a wedding photographer, it kind
Yeah.
of breaks my brain a bit.
Yeah.
I don't live in those social circles. My weddings that
Right.
I attend as a friend or a guest are not
Yeah.
the same weddings I photograph.
Yeah. And
And
that's
so it's
okay.
strange.
Yeah. And something I think that is interesting, and I've like put a lot of thought into that because I think I, for a while, got like imposter syndrome from that exact thing and being like, I couldn't ever afford like, you know, a $12,000 wedding. Like, who am I shooting one? Um, but if you think about it, like, I used to be a server, and we had like, there were two restaurants in this place that I served at, and one was like the very, very high end, like, you know, $80 like per dish, like hundreds and hundreds of dollar like wines being sold every night. And like, in order, like the most incredible servers we had there, like they're not eating there. But like there's no correlation. Like no one ever said like in order to, work that job, you need to be, that person. And I think just thinking a lot about that like helped me um, you know, eliminate some of that imposter syndrome, and also saying that like there's no direct correlation in the sense of like, why would what my wedding looks like have anything to do with the work that I'm creating for someone else's wedding? Like there really isn't a correlation there. These are two separate things.
Yeah, they don't talk to each other at all. And like the work that you're creating and the work that a ton of people that are listening to this or make work are creating are is worth so much more value than they know. And even if your work isn't trendy or exciting, even if it's complacent and you charge more, whoever is paying you is only going to want you. It's only going to solidify that that is the right person that wants you. You're the ideal. I don't like the ideal client scenario, but I do like the ideal photographer scenario. So to be the perfect photographer for someone that wants it, and at that part, like your price can be anything because that person just wants exactly what you're making.
Right. Yeah. Oh, 1,000%. And something I feel like that changed my entire mindset, and it's kind of what helped me like land on the pricing I'm at. I'm trying to think. Yeah, okay. I feel I'm someone who always has to credit like every single quote or like any idea like I've ever learned. I need to like find the person in my library in my brain and give it to them. Like I'm
I try to do it
that.
without name dropping, but then
Yeah.
I'm like I know who said the psychological quote. It was Ben
Yeah.
Sasso, but I was like, I already said Jordan and Benj and Jess. I was like, be quiet. I don't
Yeah.
need to say it again. But like, those are the people who inspire me.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
their
yeah.
blogs I've read and their Instagrams I
Yeah.
follow.
Yeah, not me like trying to think. So Nathan Chansky on his
Yep.
podcast, I think it was the podcast with India Earl, he said like, where do you have to be priced at in order to show up as the best photographer? Like to show up as the photographer that your clients deserve. And I think that's like just what changed everything for me, because it's not a it's about all the other things. It's about the experience, but like I've struggled so much with burnout, and I'm like still trying to remedy that. And it's like, what does my pricing look like in a way where I'm not shooting triple header weddings, because I'm not showing up no matter how much I love the couple, no matter how much I love the job. I am not showing up for that third wedding in a row the same way I showed up for that first wedding, So like, what does my pricing look like for me just to show up for one individual wedding? You
Yeah,
know,
someone I just spoke with on a podcast last week had said, his thing is that he's been shooting for 15 years now, so he's been in it for a while, and he does a lot of really amazing work, and he's been successful for a long time, and he accredits that to being well rested. He has
mm,
2 or 3 kids and a family, and so he has this balance to maintain. And he said that if I can show up to a wedding day well rested, I'm able to be creative. And if I'm strung out or burnt out or tired or life has gotten in the way or whatever it may be, he's not able to be the kind of photographer that he feels he needs to be the price that he is, and then he feels bad, and that's a whole nother level. But what keeps you? So you're obviously booking the right clients and not booking too many. So you mentioned burnout. What are you proactively doing to maintain not running into that kind of a burnout scenario?
Mm. So I actually, it was funny because about like 4 months ago, I'm like sending my photographer friend like a voice memo, having like a mental breakdown, being like, oh my God, I'm the only one not booking for 2025. Like, I'm crying and I'm like, I don't know what to do, blah, blah, blah. Like, everyone else seems to be booking for 2025. Then it's like flash forward 2, 3 months. I'm like looking at my calendar zoomed out and I'm like, oh my God, I'm already flying to like 7 different states. I'm hosting like 3 sold out retreats. Like, what if I want to go on vacation? What if I want to do something? And it's the same exact thing. Like, I think we almost end up doing these things to ourselves and we don't realize it because, like, we're so stressed out about work. And I've thought a lot about this. And I think it's so common in photography because we come from this place of being like the starving artist, who can't pay the bills. And, we're trying to leave our full time job that we hate. And then we're just trying to like make any money we can with photography. Then we finally go full time. And we go full time and we're scared shitless. And we're like, we need to be able to continue to pay the bills. We don't have this guaranteed salary. I'm going to book whatever I need to. And then we book too much and we scale back. And then we scale back. And then we're like, oh shit, I'm not booking enough. And then we book more. And I think that's how it's so common, like with photographers, that they are overdoing it because you can technically say yes to 3 weddings. And maybe in the back of your head, you're like, okay, I can outsource this, I can outsource that. But you just end up becoming so strung out in the, it adds up quick, especially when you add in travel. So I temporarily put a hold on my 2025 bookings because I was looking at my calendar and I'm like, wow, I already am filling up. It happened so much faster than I would have ever expected it to. And then I thought about this a lot, but I decided to temporarily hold off on booking elopements because I found that this wedding season, I did I want to say two triple header weddings this year because I booked them like a year and a half ago. I will not do triple header weddings. That is like a promise I made to myself, and it's a promise I'm making to my clients. Same deal, like the first and third wedding, you're not showing up the same. But I'm no longer going to be doing elopements because I just noticed that is what was like draining my last bit of energy this year, like between shooting these weddings. Like, then I'm having to schedule like 3 or 4 planning calls with my elopement clients, and it's just like always adventure elopements, so I'm always driving so far and booking the travel and then driving back and then having to shoot a wedding 2, 3 days later after I'm like hiking in the mountains for hours. And I just realized I can't be the wedding photographer like in the niche of wedding photography that I'm in, and then also be an adventure elopement photographer driving 7 hours on a Tuesday, planning their
On
whole
paper, they
elopement.
sound so easy. I go 2 people for 3 hours. That sounds great,
Yeah.
but throw in all the planning that's required because you're basically the wedding planner at that point,
Right, right.
and the figuring out where we're gonna go and what time we're gonna do it and how we're gonna get there and whatever travel exists for it. It's quite. I mean, yeah, the post process on it, it's actually pretty quick, but the actual logistic energy is quite a bit. How do
Hmm.
you so whenever I've started to like, I think every photographer relates to what you said about that 2 or 3 month period. I call it the 2, 3 month freak out. Like, I'm standing in the shower in like November and I'm
Yeah.
thinking about how nobody's emailing me and I'm freaking out. And it's part of the reason I have exited myself from the industry as a full time gig because I just really don't like how I feel during that period. And then things start coming through, or I get what's called desperation bookings, where the wrong wedding at the wrong price comes through, and I just book it just because. And now, as I've pulled back, or even then when I'm trying to say, hey, I don't want to take as much, that email comes through, and the email says $6,000 or something. $6,000 it's really hard to say no when that email's sitting there. How do you how do you console yourself or feel good to yourself when you say, you know what? Yeah, that wedding in Banff that I'd really love is the day after such another day, and the client, everything lines up. It's the perfect gig, but you got to say no to balance out for what you just said to be rested. How do you kind of self-soothe and go, it's okay, this is the right decision
Hmm.
I'm making for the bigger picture?
Yeah. Oh, 1,000%. I mean, I say that every time. I must really just be agreeing with you.
I
Um,
thought about when the person reads the transcript for this, they're gonna be like, she says 1,000%. So right, this
I
conversation.
I usually just it's so funny. I usually just say that when I like really agree with someone, but I guess you're just making like solid
Maybe
questions
we're
and
both just
points.
really agreeable.
Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna dial it back to 100% next time. But
Perfect.
anyway, no, I totally agree. I
But
think
how much do you agree?
like
100%?
950%.
Okay, cool, cool, cool. That's what we can
This
work
time,
with.
sorry. Do better next time. Um, but knowing, I think having this really, really clear picture in my mind of what that yes has looked like and just like the havoc it's created, you know. Uh, and also just remembering that, like, sure, mentally, it might not sound horrible to like shoot those 3 weddings or bulk all your sessions in a week, but realizing what the aftermath and all the work that comes with that looks like. And also just knowing that, like, every time I have left that free, like something else has come that's like better and in more alignment. And, you know, sometimes we have to say no, and that's okay because there, what comes around, like, I believe what comes around goes around, and I might refer that client to my friend, and then
I
they
was
might,
just going to ask.
you
I
know,
feel like the referral cycle on that is the benefit.
yeah. And, you know, I even just had a friend telling me, so, okay, there was a wedding I really, really, really wanted to take, and I just could not swing it. Like, I knew I couldn't swing the travel no matter how much I wanted to. I loved the couple. It like broke my heart having to tell them no. Like, I probably should have told them no a little bit sooner. Um, but I was like, listen, I promise to leave you guys in good hands. I actually, like, my photographer friend that I'd say is like arguably the closest to my style, like, I asked her if she had the availability and almost like handed them over. And like, I'm telling you, I thought I was the perfect fit for them. But my friend who was taking them, I mean, they're like best buds now. Like, they're a better fit. And I just think that saved, like, if I showed up to their wedding the way I would have had to, like, half asleep, half assed, like, probably resentful, like, that would have done me worse in the long term because that's my name. Like, my business is my name. And that's their wedding day. Like, and I think, and I don't know if this sounds bad, but like, we have to also not be selfish and remember that, like, this is their wedding day. Of course, we have to pay bills and of course we want to do it, but this is their wedding day. They get one, and they truly deserve a photographer that can show up for them completely, fully, wholeheartedly. And you want the same for yourself. If you're making that big of an investment in wedding photography, you would not want a photographer who's showing up like not wanting to be there. And that's our job, is to like remove whatever, you know, we want for themselves and really put the client first in that situation. So I think that has just like helped me make the decision, as hard as it might be sometimes.
I think the long term effect of any decision in wedding photography is that, like, let's say I shoot 30 weddings this year, and 15 of them are awesome, and 15 of them are great. They're fine. My goal isn't that next year 30 of my 30 are going to be awesome. It's that 16 of the 30. I just want the next year to be a little better. And I think that you can almost have that reflective impact by looking back through your old work. I just recently kind of dug back through my, like, kind of frequently for some reason, through a pile of my work. And when I look back through every wedding, I get kind of hit with some pangs of maybe too much self-criticism or self-deprecation. But I often look at the wedding and I go, oh man, I don't think I served these people A younger 22,
Mm.
3-year-old me did as good of a job as 34-year-old me would have chosen to treat these people, because I shot 3 weddings that weekend and I had a ton of flights and I was tired, and I left the wedding and it probably was a 6 out of 10, and they probably felt it was a 10 out of 10, but reflectively looking back,
Mm.
I feel really bad about it. And as I look through the years, as I get closer and closer to like current present day, I feel less and less of that, because I think
Mm.
that hopefully I was doing that. I went, you know what? My goal isn't to make all the money. I remember looking at my budget one year and going, I'm making 30 grand less this year, but I'm shooting like 20 weddings less. I'm
Mm.
okay with those numbers. I'm okay with 4 weeks off in between Saturdays. And so I think having like, it's really, really powerful to think really about what you just said. It is their day. And it's almost kind of hard to remember that because we shoot weddings so often. Some of their specialness disappears a bit. Like other people only go to a few weddings a year. You're going to
Mm.
tons. And
Right.
so I think that remember, this is a really valuable day. And Miles Whit Boyer speaks at length about honoring your clients. I think it's a really specific sentence.
Mm.
And if you are too stressed or strung out or tired, it's just, who's going to be the better person? So whoever you referred was obviously, boom, that's the perfect
Right.
thing. And now those clients, that bride and groom, those two human beings have a way better special experience because you chose to relax, take the day
Mm.
off.
Mm. Yeah, I think that's such a key part is that self-reflection. And when we get busy, things move so fast. Like I know I've felt this like just like blanket of kind of stress just laying over me and knowing that it's September and summer is basically over and I blinked and it's gone. And I know that's because of how busy I was this entire summer. And I mean, my summer started with like a wedding, a retreat, and then it has just flown to August. And when I was kind of sitting down doing my reflections after shooting a few weddings in July, I kind of felt like, yeah, this like tinge of guilt. And after being with my clients on their wedding day and just like feeling how wonderful they are and feeling how connected I felt to them on their wedding day, just wishing I showed up a little bit better in the process before the wedding. And that's not me like being hard on myself. That's genuinely speaking, I could have shown up better if I wasn't stressed so thin. And, there were like a few times where we couldn't coordinate like a phone call because I had too much like stuff going on and they wanted an extra call. And I was like, just send me voice memos instead. And I wonder if like, I was like, you know what, I can open up that 9 p.m. slot for you. Not like, walking over my own boundaries, but just like having the bandwidth to really, really go above and beyond for them. Or just like get out that welcome gift a little bit sooner, like,
Yeah.
so,
I think that the timing can be tough though. I
right.
try to put like most of these clients work a 9 to 5, so they can't talk during that period of
Mm.
time. My evening is blocked off. My Saturday I'm shooting a wedding. My Sunday I'm tired. It is. I think that boundary can be really flexible, and so I
Right.
I would say try anyone listening just not to beat yourself up too much. If all right, I gotta take that like 8 p.m. call. Like that does
Oh,
suck,
yeah.
but it's kind of unfortunately part of the gig sometimes.
Right. Oh, yeah. And I think there's, how do I word this? I went from like being walked all over, to then like setting really, really hard boundaries to the sense where I feel like sometimes I didn't go above and beyond for clients every once in a while when I really, really could have, just because I was so stretched so thin and I had nothing left in me to do that. And after like doing all that reflecting, I kind of had to take a step back and be like, you know what? I cannot like just rinse and repeat like what I did this year, next year. And I like made that really big decision to like shift into education, which I'm really, I feel really grateful and privileged to have that opportunity while I kind of navigate what a workload looks like where I can show up as the best photographer and my best self. Cause I noticed like, what I just said with weddings and also with some couple sessions, like I'd get to these couple sessions and they'd be great, But then I'd get these ideas during the sessions and I'd be like, you know what? I could have spent a little more time planning. And it could have been like that. It could have been just like a little bit better if I had that time to spend planning, but I didn't because I, you know, was overworked. And right now I'm choosing to kind of shift into education for next year and put that hold on booking weddings and, letting go of elopements for now so I can figure out what that genuinely sustainable workload looks like for me.
Yeah, I think you've answered my next question already, which was, what's your problem? Which is, what are you working on? And I think that that's a really good, like the non rinsing and repeating, because I think it's really easy to end your wedding season, finish your editing up by Christmas or something. New Year's passes around. Depending if you're traveling or not, you might glide right into weddings in January or February.
Mm-hmm.
And or if you're like me, you take 6 months and lay around on the couch and play video games and ignore all your tasks. And then suddenly it's wedding season again. And
Mm-hmm.
it's really easy to just fall into that rhythm for year over year. Um,
Yeah.
so is that what you're focusing on now for 2025, would you say primarily?
Yes, that is, you're correct. That has been my problem. And well, just with you saying the year after year, I think that was, a big part of it too is like, especially in this industry, with, my dad's job. He does like blue collar, he owns like, takes out boilers, I don't know, owns some sort of recycling business. And his work is like more monotonous and it doesn't propel him through the years as quickly, if that makes sense. But when you're a photographer, it's just like wedding season's here, you'll blink, it's over. And next thing you know, you're like, you're 30 years old, you know?
I think it's because it's seasonal and it funds your entire year. If it was seasonal, it was
Yes.
like you worked Best Buy seasonally or something, it'd be different. But because it's seasonal and it financially supports your whole year, that everything is based on that little like 3 to 6 month window of work. And the other half of that kind of rips by. You almost like, I
Right.
found myself not, I plan a lot. I plan a ton for wedding season, but I don't really plan anything for non-wedding season. There's almost
Right.
no plan. It's kind of an empty void in my calendar.
Mm-hmm. And then it's like you haven't seen your friends in months. And so whatever you spend like your 3 months after wedding season's over sending out galleries and like doing damage control. And then you're like, oh wait, I have friends. I have to see them all. And oh my God, like I should finally paint the walls of my house that I've been waiting to do. And like, and then, next thing you know, it's wedding season again. And I this past year of going full time is the genuine fastest year of my life. And I have not spent much time with myself this year. Like myself that is not a photographer, myself that is just like a human without a job, and learning a lot about, I've been learning a lot more about like slow living and intentional living. And in Europe as a whole, but like France especially, it's and this is just like what I've learned, and I know it's different in different parts of France, but it's almost offensive to just like ask someone what their job is before you have any other conversation or small talk with them. And I think we identify so much as our in America as a whole and as photographers because you are your brand. You're the photographer, that's it. You usually don't have this huge team. Maybe you have an assistant and an editor, but they're contracted. So, like, in realizing that my whole life this past year has been my business, I was like, how can I need to come back to that separation. And I
Yeah,
also
you're
need
more
to,
than just Hannah the photographer. There's a lot more to you as a person. And I think this business in particular, but many, but this one, you can fall into that trap of that's your identity. And everyone you meet from
yeah,
a certain point forward only knows you as that.
yeah, right. And it's almost all you talk about. And I'd notice I'm like even catching up with friends and it's just like, how's this business going? And everything was just talking about my business. So I made this decision to um, launch my course at the end of September. And I've been working on it for a really long time now. And I was originally going to wait till like the end of the year, maybe December. But then I kind of realized I was just like, um, getting myself back in that cycle of, okay, busy season's going to be over, and then I'm working on my course, and then it's going to be launched in like December, January, and then I have 2 more months until busy season starts again. So I had to make, or I didn't have to, but I made that decision to actually launch it kind of in the midst of my busy season, even though it would be a lot of work right now in order to be able to take that step back and navigate life and what I want next year to look like when busy season is over, come like October, November, December, and then really go into that new year, like knowing what I'm going to be able to take on and how I want to navigate 2025.
I think that's a super tremendously healthy thing to figure out kind of arguably early in your full-time portion of your career. Like I really wish I had figured that out a lot earlier than I did. And that's just going to lead you to so much more success. And man, that's incredible. I really, really appreciate your time today. This has been so insightful to seeing a career kind of fast track and then turn into a totally different thing that it sounds like is really beneficial to
Mm.
Hannah, not Hannah and her business, but to Hannah. And I think that's really, really valuable as a creative.
Yay. Yeah, thank you so much. It's so important. I mean, it's at the end of the day, like we need to remember that we're creating sustainable businesses. We're not just like looking at this 3 month busy season, like you're looking at your life. And it needs to be sustainable.
Yeah. Such good takeaways. Thank you again so much for your time. And yeah, this has been really fantastic. I'm stoked for the next time we get to do a podcast.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much. This was so much fun.